Hello and welcome everyone to the first EdTech Lounge session of 2025. Today's EdTech Lounge session is on using GenAI in teaching and learning medicine, and we're going to do it in a very conversational style. We're really happy to have Dr. Sadia Fatima and Professor Simiat Elias with us in this session. Today's session will be moderated by Azra Naseem, who is the Director Blended and Digital Learning at the Network of Quality Teaching and Learning at Aga Khan University. She's also a senior instructor at the Institute for Educational Development. Our speakers today will be Dr. Sadia Fatma, who is an associate professor in the Department of Biological and Biomedical Sciences at Aga Khan University, and also the chair of the Haley T. DeBass Teachers Academy. As an education technology enthusiast, she has co-facilitated numerous sessions on innovative teaching strategies, including those on AI. She has played a key role in co-developing the curriculum for the UGME longitudinal theme on AI in medical education practice, and overall is constantly contributing to digital technology integration into her teaching and learning. We also have with us Professor Simiat Elias, who is an academic and researcher in the Physiology and Medical Education Department with over 23 years of experience. She is passionate about the intersection of technology and education and has been actively exploring the integration of generative AI and digital tools in teaching and learning. As the founding chair of the Department of Physiology at Aga Khan University, Medical College East Africa, she is driving innovation in curriculum development using technology to enhance biomedical sciences education. We're very pleased to welcome participants from all across the world, as well as our speakers and moderator. And now we'd like to start the session. So let's begin with the first question. We'd request Professor Simiat to answer first. So, how have you, as a medical faculty, used GenAI tools in the past 2 years or so? Describe your students, the program you teach, which GenAI tools you've used, and what have you used them for? Please, Professor Simiat.
I started using artificial intelligence, in particular the generative AI tools, because it's one of the things that AKU demands that we do. As an institution, AKU embraces technology, and so there was no point shying away from the fact that our students know about this technology and they will use it. So I started receiving training, and in the last 2 years, I've used ChatGPT, which is one of the generative AI tools. Use it to summarize information, to prepare slides, generate quizzes. So generally automate things that would have taken me more time to do if I had to sit down and do it myself. I've also used ChatGPT to, produce some illustrations where I wasn't so happy with the outcome, maybe because of my limited prompts or whatever given to it. I've used Gemini, of course, especially when I needed to have references for the content that I was generating. I've also input information from the traditional sources into these two tools to have the information summarized for me to reduce the time that I have to spend doing that. I've used Gamma as well as DAL-E for generating illustrations, trying to explain concepts to my students, and I found that these were a bit better in generating the illustrations rather than the other tools that I had mentioned earlier. So these were the things that I've used for teaching my students adding that to changing the traditional way that I had been used to teaching before I joined AKU and before the onset of generative AI tools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Simiat. So I'll come back to you with a follow-up question, but let me turn to Dr. Sadia. Dr. Sadia, please tell us, how have you used generative AI in the past 2 years or so?
Thank you, Ezra. So I'll build on to what Simiat actually talked about. So I teach students who are undergrad doing MBBS at ATU. They are Sonam students, nursing students as well. And I also teach masters and PhD students. So there are two different cohorts, and I've used generative AI and a little bit advanced level of those in different cohorts. So similar to Similar ChatGPT, Gemini, and Copilot and all of those things, I first implemented by just refining my own lesson plans, making them different from the previous year that I had delivered my session. I wanted to see if it gives me different case studies, different questions, formative assessment kind of things that I could implement in my class. The next thing that I did with my undergrad students was that I sent them a resource that was my generated through textbooks and all of those curated things. And then I also asked them to generate their own resource on a particular concept through ChatGPT or any generative AI that was there. And then in class, we discussed and compared whose resource helped the students better. And this is the first time that I implemented this. So this is 2 years ago. And at that time, ChatGPT was not as advanced as it is now. So the students mentioned that the teachers' resources had more depth, whereas GPT's resources were superficial, hallucinations, and all of that thing. So that was one experiment that we conducted there. Then as things progress and as they advance the technologies, now I've started, giving students help in kinds of literature searches, data analysis using AI and other tools, specifically for them to generate infographics and short video resources to summarize huge lessons and, video resources or papers that they've read. So now they can convert it into a one-pager infographic, and that helps them understand and remember that for later versus going back and watching those videos on a speed of 2x or something. So these are some areas that I've experimented. Maybe some things will elaborate as we move on to the next questions.
Thank you. So thank you for sharing the way you've used. So I can see that you have used just generative AI tools to enhance your lessons, your lesson plans, and teaching resources. But at the same time, you've also encouraged your students to use generative AI for learning purposes. So, Sadia, if I may just continue with you for the second question, in order to do all of this, did you have to make any changes in your pedagogy or in your assessments? And if so, what changes have you made? And how have your students responded to these changes?
Yeah, so that was the trick, actually, the difficult part or the challenge. So if I had added a prompt and it gave me the whole answer, the generative AI, the first question that came to my mind was the same thing my student would do, and why would they come to my lectures then? So I asked ChatGPT to give me a way which can out GPT the students, for the same concept that I'm teaching later on. And I did get some good things, and I used them. Some of them I was using previously, such as flipped classrooms, implementing pecha-kuchas for correlating presentations and things which GPT cannot do for them. The student has to actually come and present or talk or discuss and debate about or justify things like this, right? But then there was something that GPT suggested, and I used them, for example, using journal articles or using textbook papers. And we in class then use these generative AI tools to summarize, discuss different sections of that paper or a paragraph of that concept, and then debate about how it will relate to the human physiology for the topic that we're discussing, and then how does it relate to diseases and treatment and things like this. So rather than delivering simple lectures, I actually had to revamp and make it more discussion-based, more question-answer based, and not just a monologue that I was standing there and doing things. So that was the major change I had to do.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to you, Sadia. So the same question, Simiat, did you have to make any changes in your teaching, in your assessment, in order to incorporate the use of generative AI?
Certainly I had to, because there was no way using generative AI tools that you could teach in a traditional manner. The students already have all the information you want to present, so you're not going to be the sage on the stage, being at the center and giving, the way we would teach traditionally. So I had to make a lot of changes, just like Sadia said. One of the things I did was changing the classroom into a place where we would have activities rather than just teacher talking to the students and the students taking notes. So I would use the generative AI tools to generate cases, which I then present to the students for them to now discuss and bring out the concepts therein. I also set them as assignments to create concepts, link concepts from whatever it is that we were learning. They would have to now create their own concepts, link those points together and show that they understand them, because if they did not understand, there was no way they were going to be able to link the concepts. We also have things like role play, which also make the students think. It brings out their creativity, makes them want to put in a play manner, like in a skate, what they've just learned and how they understand and interpret the information that they have. So using generative AI tools made me move away from the traditional recall kind of assignments into actually making students critique what they're learning and show that they understand what they're doing. If I might just show you a brief study that I did with them, just to say how they're using the generative AI tools and what it was that how they're saying why they're using it and all that. This was done amongst all the two cohorts. Can you see the slide I'm showing you? Can you see the slide, please?
No, not yet.
Not yet,
Okay,
no.
Okay, Aisha, can you put it up, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So what I've just done was to ask them why they're using what they're using, because sometimes when you walk around in the class, can you go on to the next one, please? So this just to show that most of the respondents were second-year students. Next one, please. And then I asked them, I shall go on to the next one, please. Yes, I asked them why they were using what they were using. Most of them used ChatGPT, and they were using it to clarify the concepts for themselves. After the class, they would go on, and sometimes also within the classroom, you would see them actually contacting or using these tools. And when I asked them why, they told me this was why they were using it, get immediate feedback, they can resolve have solutions to the things that were still bothering them. The next one, please. The next one, please. They also used for illustrations, and they use that also to make sure that they could understand the concepts. They could put them together and help them to remember, integrate, and use information much better than they would if it was just the teacher dishing out all the information. Thank you, Aisha. So this was some of the things that they were doing, and which was being encouraged by the change in the way I teach the classroom. And then for assessment, I wasn't just doing recall. I was also asking them, you would give them a case and ask them to dissect, look at it, why is this, and why is that, what has changed? So it's not just parroting what ChatGPT or whatever other tool they're using was giving them. It was them interacting with those things and then, understanding and bringing and showing that they could actually understand what was going on. So we're not discouraging them from using the tool. Sometimes when you walk around in the classroom and you're behind the table, they try to, close their laptops and all that. We have to tell them, no, it's allowed. It's just what you do with information that's important. And then we're guiding them in how to use it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm guessing from your responses, both of you, that your students are quite happy with this change on the use of generative AI and other digital. So the response is so far very positive. So that's good. But in order to make this pedagogical shift, or in order to make this shift in your assessment, tell us what sort of challenges you came across and how did you address them? Are there challenges which you're still struggling with? So, if I may ask Simiat, if you could share with us the challenges.
Okay, thank you. One of the first few challenges I met when I started using generative AI tools was the fact that it was giving me so many wrong information. And I ended up spending my day just telling the tool, this is not correct. Don't you want to look at this? And then we say, oh, thank you, Simiat, or thank you. I apologize for that wrong information. So it was time wasting. Okay. And then the volume of information it will give you in response to a simple prompt was also so much. But then as I continued to attend the EdTech lounges and the QTL workshops, I learned how to give better prompts. And I think refining my prompts has reduced the challenge that I was having initially. Although, of course, it still gives some wrong information. So I find that I have to be extra vigilant in looking at the information I was getting and ensuring that I wasn't perpetrating wrong information. I wasn't sending wrong information to my students. So those were the first major challenges I faced. Then sometimes it fails. Okay, you've planned to do something. Maybe there was a time I wanted to use a Mentimeter to enhance the feedback that the students would get immediately and all that, and it failed. Okay, so I had to quickly go do something else. And of course, the fact that the students have all the information you want to give them at their fingertips. So that was a challenge which made my work actually change and also made it better, I think, because now I had to look for other ways to pass the information rather than wanting to give them everything. Now I understand that you already have the information. So why don't we just interrogate the information that you have and see, we'll try and if there's anything that you don't understand well, or if there's somewhere that you're making a wrong connection, then I can help you with that. So the classroom became more interactive, it became more enjoyable, in my opinion. So those were the challenges from my side. The challenges from the student side was that whereas some of them were enthusiasts, they use the generative AI tools alongside the traditional resources. They would confirm what they've learned. There were some who just believed everything that they get from generative AI too. These ones I kept trying to let them know that the software, the app itself tells you I can make mistakes. Why are you not believing I can make mistakes? Sometimes they're actually arguing with you based on what they've said on ChatGPT or Gemini and all that. And so it's still a struggle with that group of students that believes everything that comes out of the generative AI too. But I believe we're getting there. Thank you.
I think those are really, the challenges, they resonate with me. And I think that some of these challenges are also, I've been struggling with these, particularly with the younger students who tend to believe everything that the generative AI tools provide them. And so how do we address that is something that I guess we can talk about further. So Sadia, what challenges have you come across, and which challenges are you still struggling with?
Right. So some are very similar to what Simiat mentioned. The first and foremost was over-relying on AI by the students. And then they ended up realizing at the end that if they used AI to solve an assignment, and if that answer was actually wrong because we had asked for a justify your response, and they were unable to do that in the end, that was one. And the second one was, since they gave the same prompt, because the question was the same, right, for an assignment. So all 100 students ended up submitting 98, 99% similar things. And as you use AI, generative AI, you know what kind of output it gives you, what kind of words it's very notorious of adding on. For example, in the realm of this, or similarly, moreover, however, and stuff like that, right? So these were the things. Then, of course, then we sat down with the students and we said, listen, where is your input in this? Where is your understanding? Yeah, you will get a grade out of it. You will pass this assignment. You will move on to the next. But then when you come across a patient who's coming and presenting with the same issue, how are you going to relate that with the concept that you have? And how are you going to, justify the diagnosis or do a differential diagnosis, or even do a recommended test or a treatment? So this was one conversation that we had. On part of the faculty, so when we started using this, again, we also became very over enthusiastic, and faculty also tried to over rely on generative AI specifically for question making. And I think that's the biggest challenge, because if we, there's no harm in asking it to give us some ideas of what kind of questions, but then if we ask it to generate questions and we start testing those questions, one day or the other, someone sitting somewhere would give the same prompt and the same question would come. So again, that is a worry, and that is a worry still, because we still see people overusing it and then not tweaking it or confirming the answers or the options. And that's when we administer the test and we get the response and we say, oh, the answer key was wrong. How did it, get to this point? So things like this were something that were issues. Then when I taught my master's and PhD students about how to use it for data analysis and dummy data and stuff, one thing that came out was some confidential information. For example, data sets, students started uploading it on the generative AI tools, which is, of course, not a good thing to do, because then, as Simiat mentioned, there's another disclaimer that all generative AI tools give, that we will be using your data for training and improving ourselves, and then this is going to be in our repository. So that was another thing that then we started this conversation. Whenever I teach, I always tell them how to not give their data set, but ask generative AI to generate a dummy data set where they can practice whatever they want to, do in terms of stats or analysis or graph representation and things like that. So yeah, these were some major challenges that we had.
So I think these are some very, I think these, I'm sure that the participants here can also relate to some of these challenges, particularly the one about, students or even, faculty and staff inadvertently sort of uploading confidential or our research data and so on and so forth. So that requires a bit of awareness raising and so on. So I'm going to come back to it, but I have this one question that I really want to ask both of you. So we've heard a lot about how the use of generative AI can affect the development of creativity and problem-solving skills. However, when both of you have talked about, that you've used generative AI in your courses and you've even allowed your students to use generative AI. So I want to know, what is your experience? Does generative AI really affect the development of problem solving and creativity skills? Sadia, do you want to start, and then we'll come to Simiat?
Sure. Sure. So it's a brilliant question, Azra, and I think there is no correct answer for this. I think it depends on how you use it. So if you are over relying on it, whatever it gives you as an output, you're believing it, then yes, then you're not using your neurons. And if something is not used, it's physiological. It just stops functioning later on, right? If you're not using our muscles, they just lose their strength and all of those things. Similar thing happens with the neurons in our brains. But if you are actually using it to challenge or brainstorm ideas, then yes, it's not going to do anything with your creativity. The thing that I like most about using generative AI to actually get rid of the mundane tasks, for example, writing minutes, for example, revising a lesson plan. For example, if I have an idea of a case study or something, I just give that input to it and ask it to refine it, formulate it. So these are all mundane tasks that had already taken up a lot of my mental energy. Now, once it's done, then brilliant ideas come to me and say, oh, okay, now I can retweak it. Now I can do this. So I don't think so far up till now, as much as I've used it, it has not hindered my curiosity or creative thinking, similarly for my students. But in fact, it's actually giving them ideas, which they then explore, and then, that then goes on. One more thing that actually helped is that we sometimes don't like typing a lot. So now all these generative tools have this option, and you can just speak to it. And knowing the kind of students that we have who have developed these lingos, and the language is completely different. They don't even talk in full sentences. They don't even write in full sentences. So that speaker or the speech option of the generative AI has actually helped a lot for us as well and for our students. So whenever an idea comes, you just turn it on and ask, this is this, and it's going to start typing. You can then read it later on, tweak it later on. Life's easier this way.
Wow. Okay. So this is a feature that I must try next time, Sadia. So we need to sit down and you need to teach me how to do that. Simiat, so what is your sense? Do you think that the use of generative AI has negatively affected your or your students' creativity or problem-solving skills?
Definitely not. It has not. And that's because we are trying as much as possible, as I said earlier, to wean the students off overly relying on these tools. When they do, like Sadia said, if a student is overly reliant, they don't use their brain, they don't think, all they do is, copy, paste, copy, paste. But what we've done, or at least what I've done in my classes, is to give them tasks that they cannot get a simple, correct answer from the tools they're going to use. Somehow they have to interact with whatever output that they got, and they have to make it their own. So, and if you see the kind of things that these students are coming up with, sometimes I marvel myself. They explain concepts in a way that I would never in the next 100 years been able to even imagine. Okay, so it brings out the creativity in them, gives them a platform where they can actually use how their creativity in a better way than they would ever have been able to use it with pen and paper. So I don't think so far what I've seen, it's not influenced them. Rather, it's not influenced them negatively. Rather, it's brought out the creativity in them. And because of the fact that they work in teams, okay, it's also building in them other soft skills, which we can never teach, as in teach. So they've learned to collaborate, they're learning about leadership, they're guiding one another, helping one another to succeed. So I think that it's been a real good experience for us. For the few ones who just, everything they just want to take, we keep telling them, this will not replace you. It's supposed to assist you. It's supposed to make you wonder, make you more curious, and interrogate what you're learning in class and from the traditional resources, but should not replace your brain, should not replace your skills. So I think that we've seen a visible shift from the initial, you give them an assignment, everybody just goes to ChatGPT. But now when you go around the tables, you see some of them are on the generative AI tools, some of them are on the textbooks, and then they're discussing, and before they break up their team position on what you have set, the task you've set them, they would have used the two, information together. So I don't think for AKU students so far that I've seen, it's not been a damper on their creativity.
Okay, this is actually very reassuring that this tool is not going to turn us into sort of, humans with no creativity or no problem solving skills left. So that's actually very, very encouraging. Thank you for that. Now, my next question, and I will come to the audience questions if there are any participants' questions. I'll come to that in a bit. But the next thing that I'm thinking about is, now, both of you, I see both of you as, innovative teachers, because I know that, you're constantly sort of making changes in your teaching. You've been trying out lots of new pedagogies, new technologies, and you've made changes in your pedagogy and assessment in order to incorporate the use of responsible and thoughtful use of generative AI in your courses. So if I ask you to tell us what sort of competencies do we need, do the faculty members need in order to use generative AI, responsibly and thoughtfully in the courses. So what would be, top 2 or 3 things in terms of competencies for faculty, but also for students, so that they can continue to use generative AI thoughtfully and responsibly. So, Simiat, may I ask you to begin? What would be your top 2 or 3 competencies?
Well, the first thing is for faculty and of course also students, we must understand the basics of the AI, how it works, how especially generative AI tools, how they work. The fact that they have limitations, they have biases, there's potential for error. We must all understand that. We should also learn how to incorporate the use in a responsible manner. What I mean by that is we must be ready to take responsibility for whatever outputs we are getting. We know that we are liable, and so there must always be an oversight from our part. Sometimes the information that we get, because these bots, they've been very well trained, okay? They've been very well trained. The information sounds plausible, but you have to be able to discern. You have to understand what is hallucination, what is correct, and all that. So, and if we are able to do that and able to use the tools ethically in a responsible manner, I'm sure our students will also follow suit. So our students need to have some training in AI or general digital health. A lot of them are savvy, but there's some of them who are still, just trying to cope. They don't understand how these tools work. They do not understand about privacy. You mentioned earlier, Sadia, about your students putting all their data on the tools. Once you put your data, that no longer belongs to you. Okay, so there's nothing about privacy. The privacy you promised your volunteers or your patients, it's no longer there. So we have to learn these things and we have to teach our students as well. They also have to be able to interrogate the information that they get and critique that information. We need to be able to move away from the traditional recall kind of exams and actually maybe give them an assignment that would make them use the tools and then ask them to now critique what the output from that tool and or modify it or something. So we actually need to engage the students. They need to have this competency. They must be able to understand what is right or how to interpret the results that they get, the output that they get from the AI tools. Yes.
Thank you. So I think there are quite a few useful competencies that you've highlighted. I've noted them down and we'll come back to them. Sadia, what would be your top 2 or 3 competencies for both faculty and for students?
So, to put it in a nutshell, it will be all of us would have to now start practicing at a higher speed or maybe higher kind of frequency of the phrase lifelong learner. Because as we speak, generative AI that we have been using for the past 2 years has launched a very different kind of mini AI which has the skill of giving advanced reasoning. So by the second, all of these things are changing. So the competency that all of us need to actually start implementing is to keep on learning and making that change. And how would that come across? It would be coming through activities like this, where we have having conversations, we're sharing experiences, use cases, and of course the capacity building workshops that we conduct, integrating it into the curricula that we have started doing. By actually giving our students and even the faculty the literacy about what it is and how can it be used to enhance their work or whatever they're doing, and what are the limitations. I think these are the things that we need to focus on.
Yeah.
I think those are very, very powerful competencies. So, okay, so I think we've had quite a bit of good conversation. I can see some questions in the chat window. So let's look at some of the questions. I have a question from Hussein. How can discussions in a classroom be summarized? Say for this talk using generative AI, it would be useful for many. So can we do that? What are your thoughts? Yep.
Yes, we can. So just an example, the speech to text feature. For example, if we are recording this video, it will also record our audios. So we can just play the audio on our laptops, have the speech to text on our generative AI tool, and give it a prompt to listen to it and transcribe it either verbatim or transcribe it in a summarized form, in bullet forms, or maybe transcribe it as per the speaker by keeping speakers anonymous, giving speaker one name of A, B, C, and moderator question, a title of something else. So this is something that you can easily do. If you have text, you upload the text, and again, you give the prompt to generative AI, asking it to summarize, make an infographic, make a bullet point, how many bullet points, how many word summary, how many sentences you want. You just have to play around with your prompt. What is your outcome? And then it will give it to you.
And I think tools like Zoom also provide AI summary. So that's also an option that I think many people use. So, Sadia, there are a number of ways in which discussions can be summarized, and it can certainly help students in classes. So, and Dr. Meher from IET is saying that Word can also take dictation. So you can speak and the Microsoft Word will also write your speech for you. So that's actually very helpful. Thank you, Meher.
The only downsides with the Word is that it does not refine your sentence structure or grammar or spelling errors. But if you use the Word document, just then upload that Word document on generative AI and ask it to refine it for you. That's also a hack that you can do.
All right. Okay.
I think James has his hand up for quite a long time, I guess.
Yes, James, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me say a big thank you to the distinguished panel for sparing the time for this very important lecture. There's something, my question is directed towards Prof. Simiat. There too, because there's something she said that piqued my interest in that recently there've been a shift from, hours spent with student-based learning into competency-based learning. When she said, doesn't want to stand there and be a teacher, wants it to be active. And going back to that 2014 study, I think everyone who wants to be a teacher have heard it about the Knowles 2014 seminal study about how adult learners are better when they're asked to self-motivate, self-direct with task-centered learning. I was wondering whether at the Department of Physiology at HN, whether we are using any physiology AI labs. The reason I'm asking this is because I realized only when I did my master's did I understand a lot of physiology. When we were undergrads, you were 40 students huddled around something, you understand nothing. So we needed to interact with these experiments, but we couldn't. I only got to interact them when I was doing masters because then you have a lot of time because this is the only thing you're doing. And I got stuck with my master's because I could not troubleshoot. I have a server worth of emails with ADI instruments, but now ADI instruments have an online, I think it's called LT Labs, which if it was there and I had interacted with it back then, I'm sure my master's would not have taken as many years as it did. So I was wondering whether we are doing it at the physiology lab at Akuhicha for both undergraduate and postgraduate. And if we are not, is there, are we looking towards doing something like that? I know it would be very expensive. And then the next question is a quick one about we know we've seen we've read about large language models, becoming better patients in terms of teaching students to converse with patients, developing better images, directing students in how to interpret AI images. But I was wondering, I'm not sure anyone likes marking exams. How about a generative AI for marking exams? Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, James. The first thing is to
Sorry,
say,
Simiat, I think there are questions related to exams in the chat window also for you. So when you respond to the exam question, so you can also address, can you please say more on what, when you mentioned that generative AI can be used to conduct exams. So I think a lot of people are curious about it. So
okay.
go ahead.
Thank you. Let's start with that. When I said for assessments, that's what I said, assessments mainly. And assessments are in different forms. Now that we're using active learning and also, using generative AI tools as part of what we use in the classroom, as I said earlier, we cannot just do the traditional exams. We now have a very heavy formative component. And so we're looking at the processes as well. We're not just looking at the end product where we just have one major exam. We're looking at the things that the students are doing, the processes that they go through, how much they participate in the group assignments, how are they participating in class discussions. So all these are being assessed, and we're also using the AI tools to assess them. We use AI tools to mark the quizzes, the multiple choice questions. I've not had the lever to use it to mark essays. I mark my essays by myself. But for multiple choice questions, as long as you, well, in my experience, as long as you input the correct options, you can use the AI tools to mark those. But I've not used it to mark essays. I know that some colleagues who found a way to mark, use it to mark some short answer questions as well. So that's what I meant by assessments, not just the typical exams that you now have AI mark the entire essays, modified essay questions, and all those questions for that students are participating in. You use it also to monitor their progress in the formative exams or assessments that we give. Also, there was a question about the labs. At AKU Medical College in Nairobi, we are fortunate enough to have the Center for Innovation in Medical Education, CIME, and we use a lot of simulation in our physiology experiments. We even use them for our physics experiments. We also have a power lab, which is an AD instrument, which is also available in Karachi. And these have helped our students in the way they interact with the experiments that they do. As using generative AI tools, for the experiments, it's something that I am looking into. I have not started using it, but I know colleagues who've been able to, maybe we can use it for circulation, demonstrating how a patient responds to hypoxia, how they breathe and all that. But those are things that are possible, which we have not been able to use. But that's because we have these other tools that we are using and that allows students to actually interact with the experiments that we expect them to interact with. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I add a few
Yes, please,
bits here as well?
Yes.
So for the examination questions and I think the last question that is there, assessment for learning. So the key word is precision education or precision learning, and AI has been used in US in international avenues, which is actually doing this. So if you've heard of Khan Academy has actually launched a complete AI module where students can decide what to learn, where to learn, how to learn, and as well as they get assessments there. The AI assesses it, marks it, it sends them feedback. in addition to the feedback, it also sends them the resources where they are struggling to do it and then reattempt those same things, and so improve their learning. That's one thing. Unfortunately, we are living in a limited resource country, and all of these advanced level AI are not yet available in our area. There's another company called Feedback Fruits. If you get a chance, go and have a look at them. They also have applied the precision education as well as AI for assessments and marking and all of these things. But again, they charge money. All of this is encrypted. Yes, it's safe, secure, so everything will be with you. But if you want to not invest in a lot of money, what you can also do is now the free version of ChatGPT lets you create an API or an agent AI. So you can develop your own agent AI or API where you can specifically ask or design it for marking SAQs, give it a rubric, tell how many students you're going to send to it, and it'll mark, give feedback. But again, you have to design it, give a proper prompt, pilot it first with your test SAQs, and when you're okay with it, refine, then that is an encrypted API that you have, and the data will not be shared anywhere else. So this is something that you can try with that.
Thank you. I think so. This is very, very interesting. So what we are moving towards is more discipline-specific generative AI tool development. So instead of using these generic GPTs available publicly, we can move towards more specific discipline-specific generative AI tools. I just want to share an example. I don't know if we have Dr. Fahad or Dr. Murtaza Kazmi and the participants, but they have developed at AKU, developed a large language model, trained a large language model to help residents read academic articles for grand rounds, journal clubs.
Yeah, yeah.
And we've just looked at the data, and we've got some very interesting and powerful results. When residents actually use those specifically designed large language model to read, research papers and so on. So we've got, and so stay tuned. We'll invite them to come and share with us how this large language model was developed, how it was used, and so on in our future EdTech Lounge sessions. There are lots and lots of questions, and I think there's one that I want to pick up is by Jonas. So if I can just quickly kind of summarize, so Jonas would like to know that how do you balance the use of textbooks and AI-generated information? Because AI may create the illusion of being, up to date, but because then there is the scholarly journals and there is, text. So how do you guide your students in understanding the use of both sources and, the differences between them, or where to rely on published textbooks or materials versus, where to use the generative AI to access text?
Okay. So there's one simple answer to this. Let's not complicate stuff. There are certain generative AI which are updated because they are linked with internet. And whatever resources they provide you or citations they provide you is legit. So for example, Copilot, which is Microsoft's, then Gemini, which is Google's, both of these you can easily use and they are updated to the second. If you have a licensed version of ChatGPT, then it gives you an option of clicking on the search button, and that search button then connects the ChatGPT to the internet, and then that also becomes authentic. So it depends what kind of things do you have. So if you're working with a free subscription-based model, then you tell your students to use Copilot or Gemini if they are looking for resources, updated information, because you've correctly put in that yes, textbook information gets outdated very, very with the advancements these days. So it's always good to go there. The benefit of using Gemini Copilot is that they give you the reference. It's clickable. You click it, it opens up in a new tab, and you can verify it then and there if this was an authentic source from PubMed, Scopus, or a published paper.
Thank you.
And
I think it's all, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to say that for most of our students who use a free ChatGPT, what I encourage them to do is confirm the information from the traditional sources, which is a textbook. That way they never go wrong. They can have summaries from the ChatGPT or other tool, but check the summary that you have against the traditional sources. That way you can confirm whether what you've received is a hallucination or the correct information.
Thank you. And I think if I may just add, this is probably one of the competencies that we need to focus on in our programs to really sort of help our students understand, what sort of information, for what sort of information they can go to a textbook or a journal article versus the generative AI tool or, and others. So I think this is probably one of the competencies that we could include. All right, I can see that we are almost coming to the end of this session. There are still questions in the chat window, but I want to just wrap up. Now, we've talked about all of these different large language models and other generative AI tools which are available. Discipline-specific tools are being trained, and they're available to those who have access to these resources. But we are primarily in low and middle income countries, in East Africa, in Pakistan, and other South Asian countries. So what is your sense? How can we as a university in low and middle income country, or how can we as faculty in low and middle income countries prepare ourselves for the challenges that lie ahead? What do we need to do? Simiat, would you like to go?
Okay, thank you. I think that one of the things that we need to do, we're already doing at AKU, we have a guideline in place. We're training the faculty, but we also need to train the students, okay? The other thing we can do is to advocate for open sources for AI models, so that the costs of accessing these tools will not be too much for us to bear. I think that we can also work with other universities, so that we have like a shared AI resource base that would reduce the amount of resources that we're going to be, using if we're working as individuals. I think that it will be good also to work with governments, in terms of policies, in terms of what kind of research the institutions are doing, so that we can actually tap into those research activities and have, some of our colleagues also benefit from the research that the governments or the other institutions are doing. I think that if we're to do that, that would reduce the amount of resources that we need to commit, and would also expose us to more in terms of gaining from what other institutions are doing and what our governments are also doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Great recommendations. Yes, Sadia.
So adding on to what Simi just mentioned, capacity building, of course, we are doing in AKU, Pakistan, we've added the curriculum. But I think what we can tap on in is we have MOUs with a lot of universities. And maybe we can look at what kind of AI curriculum, AI literacy, or AI tools they are using. And since we have MOUs, maybe we can leverage that so that it takes the burden off from us in order to get university-wide licenses and, give all of that to the faculty and students. That's one place that we can even look at.
Thank you. So both of you are talking about more sort of, collaboration, more coordination, and so on. Just to wrap up, thank you so much for sharing with us your experiences. This was our first EdTech Lounge session for the year. where we heard from two of our esteemed faculty members about their experience of using generative AI in medical education at Aachen University. Both Simiat and Sadia talked about not things from theory, but from practice. And what we heard was that both of you have used several generative AI tools to enhance your pedagogy and also to support your students' learning. But in order to do that, both of you talked about actually making changes in your pedagogy and preparing your students for more responsible and thoughtful use of generative AI. You talked about the challenges that you faced and how you navigated those challenges. And there are still some challenges that you're struggling with, but those are perhaps challenges that many of us are. What's important is some of the competencies that you've highlighted, for faculty and for both for students, the competency of being lifelong learners, the competency of actually knowing how these models are trained, so that we can understand their appropriate use. So what you're talking about is more critical AI literacy as one of the competencies, and how both of you have tried to incorporate that in your own teaching. And finally, your recommendations for us in those of us who are in the low and middle income countries is more collaboration. And I think one message that I've also taken from your today's conversation is that, we've been for years, we've been talking about changing our pedagogy, that learners need to be in the center. We're not the sage on the stage anymore. But it seems to me, hearing from both of you, it seems to me that generative AI has actually pushed us in that direction practically. And it's really sort of said, okay, you guys have been talking about it for a number of years, and here you go. And now you have an opportunity to really become facilitators, move away from the center, and allow student-centered learning to happen. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, for sharing your experiences, Sadia and Simiat. I can see lots of messages in the chat window. We will share the recording with everybody so you can go back and listen to this. And thank you to all the participants who came to the session. We will offer more additional our EdTech Lounge sessions. Our future sessions will focus on different disciplines, so teacher education, nursing, social sciences, and so on. And we'll hear from our faculty members about their experiences. So until then, take care and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.